Hello, and welcome to On Point. I'm Jocelyn Castro. Cal State University Chancellor Timothy White announced a revision to Executive Order 1100 this summer, changing graduation requirements for Cal State University students. The impact of this order here at CSUN is to eliminate so-called Section F classes dealing with race, gender, foreign languages, and ethnicity studies. The order limits CSUN students' opportunities to take comparative culture classes like Chicano-Chicana and gender and women's studies. This will affect 167 courses on campus. CSUN is the only one of the 23 CSU campuses with the Section F requirement. The Chancellor's office didn't respond to an on-point request for an interview, but he has said the proposal was made to help incoming CSUN students graduate on time. He wants the CSU four-year graduation rate to double to 40% by 2025. But many members of the CSUN community are afraid that the elimination of Section F won't align with CSUN's commitments to diversity and will hurt the quality of students' education. Many faculty members are concerned that decisions about what students need to learn are being taken out of their hands. On Point's Morgan Ball has more on the story.
Thank you, Jocelyn. We have three guests today. Please join me in welcoming Scott Andrews, Executive Order 1100 Task Force participant and English professor, Breny Mendoza, the Department Chair of Gender and Women's Studies, and Gabriel Gutierrez, the Department Chair of Chicano Studies. Thank you all for being here. So first, I want to start with a question for you all to answer. Provost Yi Lee issued a statement saying that he was committed to keeping the comparative cross-cultural requirement a part of CSUN's general education. What can you all tell me about that? And we'll start with you, Scott.
I'll pass to Gabriel and Breny on that because I don't know how we are keeping the SLOs for comparative cross-cultural studies, since that category disappears under this executive order. I don't know how it's being, maybe they do, maybe they know how it's being incorporated.
We've been part of the conversation, and I think we don't know how this is supposed to be laid out. There are a couple of different things regarding the order I think that need to be addressed. One is the order itself. The other is the way in which it has been rolled out. So, this is important to contextualize the response to the question, where we have a Cal State system that seemingly out of the blue just said, look, you are mandated now to do this. We have our own campus central administration who came to us and said, you have to do this. And so basically what has happened is that you've had conversations about us without us. Mm. And initially the push was that we have no other alternative but to implement this executive order. And so faculty have been in discussions about the ways in which not only EO 1100 but EO 1110 came down over the summer without any consultation of faculty, right? And then the expectation that we're going to now do all the hard work and work within a year to put, to overlay F into C and D, and then to address many of the other components. Some of the faculty said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to comply. And in fact, we have issued a statement to the Chancellor's office calling on Executive Order 1100 to be rescinded. In part because just on the matter of principle, you can't make decisions about us without us again. Mm-hmm.
That's great. So, Breny, could you maybe touch on that as well?
So I think the executive order, both of them, have really made us aware that, first of all, that the CSU system has a hierarchical, vertical kind of a chain of command in which we are, as faculty, are really not even part of the chain of command. We have been kind of erased. So the executive order has really made us aware that even though we're under the impression that we were responsible for curriculum, well, we actually apparently are not. I've been seeing some information where they are saying that curriculum decisions are actually made by the Board of Trustees, and we, as faculty, seem not to have a voice. So executive order really made that aware, really of what type of institution we're actually working, and the erosion actually of something that is called faculty governance or shared governance. That seems to have really disappeared, and this is, so that's one important factor, I think. And as Gabriel has said, we receive this kind of vertical order, right, from the top. An executive order is always vertical by definition, without any faculty input. And we can tell because the executive order is not well thought out. We can see that there were many, they apparently did not stop and think what were the implications and the consequences of a really profound GE reform without faculty input. So, we have been discussing in the last weeks, and we haven't had really have time to really study it. We're just really kind of sort of like, starting to see, all the implications and the consequences that it has, actually not only for College of Humanities or Social Behavioral Sciences, but also other colleges, because it is a profound GE reform. That's one thing that I think we really need to be aware of.
It could be Dr. E was talking about, so right now we have a GE category called Comparative Cultural Studies. And the executive order says that category needs to disappear, and you can only have the categories of natural sciences, social sciences, and arts and humanities. And he sent out an email at one point saying that CSUN is still dedicated to diversity education, still dedicated to that despite this executive order. And it could be what he was suggesting was that we've been told we can create subcategories within social sciences and arts and humanities that would include a cultural diversity education. And it could be what he meant was that the student learning objectives for the comparative cultural studies category could be used to create those subcategories, but exactly how that would work, we don't know exactly if that would work in terms of encouraging students to take those classes. We weren't given any time to figure out how that could or might work. And so that may be what he's talking about in that category would preserved. So one thing I would say is, so you introduced me as a member of the Executive Order Task Force, but I was actually, what I was on is called the Chancellor's Task Force on the Advancement of Ethnic Studies, and that was put together in like 24, 25 to look at the status of ethnic studies across the CSU system. And so we put out a report in 2016 with a list of recommendations. And so we would be an example of the groups that were not consulted before the executive order came out. There's this body already put together of directors of ethnic studies programs all across the CSU that weren't asked, so what do you think about this change? How might this change work in your programs? We were never asked. And a change like this violates like 6 of the 10 recommendations we put out in that report of how to keep ethnic studies in the CSU healthy and vibrant. And at CSUN, we have perhaps the strongest, healthiest ethnic studies programs in the whole system at CSUN, partly because the way we worked.
Gender Women's Studies Department.
Gender Women's Studies and Queer Studies, and partly because of the GE requirements that we have, that we've been able to keep these really healthy programs at CSUN. Some CSUs hardly have any diversity, cultural diversity education at all on them. So.
Because, actually the elimination of Section F really means for American Indian Studies, I think, and Gender and Women's Studies, practically an elimination. You see, most of our courses really fall under that Section F. Now, with this overlay that some people are actually calling it an underlay, as a way to save our departments, it actually, we question that. Because, well, first of all, it dilutes us within these larger categories of these conventional disciplines that do not really represent, what we do. And the history of our departments, which are a struggle of students and students of color and women, was done precisely because these disciplines were Eurocentric, they were androcentric, so it was absolutely necessary to do, and we are interdisciplinary. by definition, and by this underlay really conspires against our mission, the spirit of our departments, the interests of our students.
Yeah, and it isn't only the ethnic studies and gender and women's studies and queer studies departments and programs that are being affected. Some of the more vocal opponents to this as well include Susan Fitzpatrick from the chair of the Department of History, Catherine Sorrells from Communication Studies as well, who's the chair there, who understand really also some of the larger contexts that are at play here that, incidentally, you referred to Dr. Yee's email. At a meeting on Monday, he actually did open up to the possibility of finding other solutions or proposals anyway, right, that can be that can go forth, and that was a result really of really us having to force the issue.
Right. Okay, so maybe another question for all of you. Do you feel like there are outside pressures on administration to kind of speed up the process of this executive order? And maybe we can start with you, Breny.
Well, I just read an LA Times article that actually points out that there are some external forces. So there might be at the federal level. I'm not sure. I don't know what these obscure forces are. But we know that we are living in a context, in a political climate, and that is really trying to erase diversity, from institutions and from, even from political life and social life. So it really is very unfortunate that this executive order has been passed precisely in the context of a national trend of trying to silence certain voices and to kind of really sanitize the country, So I don't have any proof, I don't know exactly who those forces are, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are really, forces that are outside of the university.
Okay.
Yeah.
Scott and Gabriel, do you guys have anything to add to that?
My sense is that at this point, really it's speculative.
Mm-hmm.
We're asking for data. We're asking for evidence that works along the lines of the rationales that are being put forth on this. And for the most part, I mean, it looks like whether there's outside forces or not, I wouldn't be able to tell you. But what does become evidently clear is that there's some lapse in the communication between and among those forces in terms of the legislature, for example,
mm-hmm.
right? Are they even aware that this is going on? Are the trustees even aware that this is going on? And an email from Executive Vice Chancellor Lauren Blanchard to the union, to CFA, actually stated something to the effect that the trustees, while they have the power to regulate curriculum, had handed that power over to the chancellor. Conversations with trustees might say otherwise in terms of, like, did we even know that this was going on?
Right.
So we're at the point right now, I think, where we're trying to gather information. We're trying to figure out, okay, what is going on? What is happening? What discussions? What's the timeline? Right. Why weren't we involved? And then how do we get involved in the process to make sure that we, campus by campus, get to determine what's the best fit for each of our campuses?
Okay. And Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
No, it's just if there were external forces, it would have been good for the people issuing the executive order to tell others of what those external forces were, but that wasn't mentioned as what
right.
it would be.
So if we were to, when the administration begins to cut and kind of reduce the requirements here, what does that say about the quality of the degree, that these students are working so hard to obtain? And that's a question for anyone to answer. If you want to start, Scott.
I was communicating with a former student, a CSUN graduate, on Facebook about this, and when I was explaining executive order to him, he thought, oh, he could understand why, because he felt like that would have made his transfer from community college easier, because he was a transfer student, and he could see how that would have he would have graduated more quickly, and he felt like he would have gotten his diversity introduction in other courses. But I was asking him, well, at what price are we going to ease graduation, right? At what price does that come? Because right now students, the example I gave him was students have to take Title V classes. You have to take 2 classes in either state and local government and U.S. Constitution, right? Because we consider that essential for people coming out of the United States University to have that knowledge. It would be easier to graduate if you didn't have Title V requirements. That would ease graduation if we just did away with Title V, but no one's going to do that. A lot of us feel that being culturally competent in a diverse community the way the United States is just as essential as that sort of Title V education, right? That it's just as essential to have a sense of the cultural diversity found in California, in the United States, in the world, et cetera, is just as important. So some of us on the task force that I was on, one of our recommendations was CSU-wide create a diversity requirement that everybody in the CSU has to take a certain number of courses in cultural diversity, because right now there isn't a CSU-wide requirement. So I think it would improve the education of a great deal of students who are required to take these. At CSUN, it's one of the most diverse campuses in the United States, and therefore one of the most diverse campuses in the world, but not every school is sort of as fortunate as we are to have the resources we do and the students we do that already know so much about that cultural diversity. There are other campuses where they have a lot of racial tension, and this might help alleviate that. So I think it would reduce from the quality of your degree if there wasn't some of this cultural diversity embedded in your curriculum.
Right. I agree with you as well. For Mendoza and also for Gutierrez, how will this order affect your enrollment?
Well, I think we would be very negatively affected. As I said, most of our courses are precisely on the section that is going to be eliminated.
Right.
So we have like 77% of our FTEs actually come from Section F. So so it will have an incredible impact. And again, these are the things that we have been discussing, looking at this alternative that they have offered without our input again, of doing this underlay. We would have, again, a problem there because most of our courses would have to fall under another category, which would be the arts and humanities. So we think, we haven't really had enough time also to see all the way the consequences, but as of just a first glance, we know that our enrollment will go down. We'll have to compete with other, we have to compete now with each other to get students to take one of the these cultural competency courses. So I think we would be very, very affected. And I know from experience for teaching here already, 16 years, that most of our students that come find us actually late. They don't really come to study with gender and women's studies. Are always very grateful for what they learn and come back to us. I'm sure it happens also in your department. So most of our students really feel that their education has really been enhanced by majoring in our in gender and women's studies. So it would be an incredible loss. Gender and women's studies is a discipline that's already 50 years old. Yeah. So it would be, and I think that in the CSU system, there's only 2 gender and women's studies departments. Oh, wow. I think a third one is right now going to be created in CSU LA. Okay. But we are kind of like a powerhouse as a department, not only within the CSU system, but we are, highly diversified and internationalized department.
That's a good point.
Yeah, all of our department are faculty of color. 100%, and we are working, with a global perspective. Because we are very international. I'm, for instance, originally from Honduras. We have professors from Iran, from Uganda. So we really are a contribution to the so-called global citizen that the university has is in the mission of the the university.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so it really would be a pity to see this department disappear because of an executive order that has not really studied the effects of it.
Right. I want to shift over to you, Gabriel. This Chicano Studies Department is one of the biggest, in the U.S. How has this department impacted CSUN and CSUN students, particularly over the years?
Well, in a variety of different ways. I think to begin, we look at how the department itself is actually structured, right? I think there are a lot of misconceptions about what ethnic studies entails. We are more of an area studies department where people from different disciplines, right, address topics, develop skills, and what have you from discipline-specific approaches. For example, I'm a historian, right? I teach U.S. history courses. Part of the narrative of history is really important from the standpoint to the trajectories that come to exist. So, typically you get U.S. history courses that begin with Plymouth Rock and then move east to west. When I teach my courses, I start with debates about the first peopling of the Americas, even before Bering Strait, to indigenous societies, and then to the Spanish colonial period, which reached out to present-day Virginia and the present-day American South,
right,
prior to the arrival of English-speaking folks at Plymouth Rock. And that sets a tone then to talking about, as Scott was saying, the constitutional issues, how policies formed and what have you, and taking into account the different trajectories and the different groups of people that are already present.
Okay.
Right? And that's important to begin to recognize, because K through 12, you rarely get that type of perspective.
Right.
And when it comes to the classroom experience, and I'm talking from my own experience as an undergraduate as well. I didn't come here, I went to UC Santa Barbara, but that is where, I got kicked out my freshman year. Let's put it that way. Right, and I came to Chicano Studies, right, where my first grade was a C, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? But what happened is that the material itself, right, got me to understand that, I had to invest myself, develop critical reading, writing, thinking skills that I then developed, that I went back and I took the courses that I failed.
Okay.
And that was how I got to learn to appreciate subject matter across the board.
So we also talked to students at CSUN about what they feel about the importance of ethnic studies. So let's actually listen.
I would be devastated because I'm paying to be here. If I wanted someone to force me to learn something that I didn't want to learn, I wouldn't come to college. I would have just been happy with my high school diploma, because that's what high school is. You take a class, but you don't really get to choose what you're learning. With these cultures, or I guess these options that we're given, we get to choose what direction we're kind of learning. And
it'd be devastating, because when it was my freshman year, my favorite class was Central American Studies, because I felt like I learned the most, because nobody really speaks about their history, and it's the one place where you get to hear more about their history, and then learn where you came from, because not a lot of people know their own history.
Is definitely because of the perspective you get. I think it's really important for us, especially where we're at now in society, to really understand different perspectives, that this is two mixtures of cultures coming together. And I took the Chicano Studies 100 class, so Chicano culture, and that really opened my eyes to not even just necessarily my own culture, but even perspectives and ideas and thoughts that I didn't even see of my own culture that we do face now, and especially in the Los Angeles and San Fernando Valley area. And I think it's something that we don't really talk about, and it's really important for us to have. So that's why I think they're super essential for them to say.
So, you just heard the reactions of students here. So what does this order mean for the future of CSUN, and why is it so important to fight this? And Scott, we can start with you.
Well, there's two issues. One, some of us want to resist it, not have it in place. And even if it did come into place, then there has to be a way to still preserve this diversity studies that we have, right? So that's like, regardless of EO 1100, that diversity studies has to remain an essential part of the curriculum at CSUN, whether it's in GE or whether it's some other category. There's got to be a way that we can find to preserve it. The way we want to preserve it is the way we have it right now. The students that spoke all happen to be students of color, and they're probably going to seek these courses out to begin with. The students who come from a different background, the students who come from a more privileged background, they may not seek our courses out, and so they may never be exposed to those things unless there's a category that requires them to. And I think that's real important, because I teach American Indian Studies, and so I will never have a classroom full entirely of American Indian students. American Indian students are less than 1% of the enrollment at CSUN. But my class is important to all those non-native students in there to hear how other people think about the world and hear about other ways of understanding gender roles and family construction and politics and history, U.S. history, like Gabriel was talking about. So it's the students, I think it's real important for the students not like those that you talked about, that they have to take these courses so that they get exposed to things outside of their comfort zone, outside of their own background, outside of their own familiarity, because that's what living in a diverse culture is about encountering people who are different from yourself.
Right, okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. That's all we have time for today, but we really appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you.
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made her college years happen. Opening that education savings account when she was little. Spearheading a campus tour. And another, and another, and another, and another. Bam! Deciphering financial aid. She was like, what? But now she's like, you aced planning for college. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
What if you could invest in the future of kids, like a stock? Not the kind of stock that's about making money, but a stock for social change. A whole new kind of investment called Better Futures. When you invest, it helps kids go to college. Believe in us, invest in us, watch us grow.
My name is Sydney, and I'm your dividend.
After 15 years of smoking, Eva Marie quit. There's a new lung cancer screening that could save her life. You stopped smoking, now start screening. Learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Thank you for watching On Point. For more information on what some faculty are doing to resist the executive order, check out their change.org petition. You can follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can watch us on LA 36 and Santa Clarita Valley Cable. And you can listen on KCSN 88.5 every Sunday morning at 5:30. For all of us here at On Point, I'm Jocelyn Castro.